the evolution of cars from tech-enabled cars to actually having a car around a piece of tech, which is what I consider Tesla, which I drive, which is like, okay, there's a computer and there's something built around it. I believe Huawei is also similar. Computer companies, tech companies are now getting into car building rather than the other way around. So that's one. It sounds similar, but I think there are completely different approaches. And my other question on the car industry, and generally because you've got a German background and I'm sure you're still in touch with that economy overall, is I have heard that the German economy overall, but especially car industry and the driving engine of Europe is in quite some trouble subsequent to that whole Nord Stream being cut off, no gas, because a lot of that industry in Germany was built on the cheap Russian gas. So what are your thoughts on that? And maybe we can cover both of these when we do the automotive case study, because I've got one third question, which is about, we rarely get people who've lived across three continents. So you've worked in India. There are some cultural and general differences versus a Germany where you've lived. There's obviously a language thing, but overall culture, how would you compare that to, say, a London or a UK culture and India culture? So this is what I'd love to cover first. What is your view as someone who's worked across three components and continents and had kids grow up in three continents?
I would say I've been very fortunate that I had that opportunity to experience working and living in three different countries, right? And three different countries where culturally, professionally, it has its own strong identities. I mean, even though at a business level, obviously we think in a very global way. I mean, we can operate anywhere in the world, but when it comes to living and interacting with the local businesses and trying to, particularly in a sales kind of a role, where you're trying to penetrate a market where you don't have existing footprint or existing base. It's not easy. It's never easy. I mean, even just moving to a country like Germany from Chennai. I was in Chennai before I left India, and then suddenly moving into Germany, where it's very, very different in terms of the way business is done, the way you interact with people. I'll leave aside the challenges of language and other soft factors, but it is absolutely enlightening to have that opportunity to interact with them and work with them, and then to a large extent have the confidence that you have been able to grow the business in a market like that from scratch. So it's a lot of it was kind of restarting my life when we relocated from Chennai to Chennai. We were very well established. I was already at a reasonably senior position. We had, all of us, like my wife was also working there. She had a good job. I had a good job. Life was like, when life gets too comfortable, you want to do something which is, what under the name of challenge, you kind of jump into a more difficult territory. That's exactly what we did. So we relocated from Chennai to Germany, and we moved, I think, towards winter was just about to start. So I saw my first snowfall when I reached, and then it really hit us hard when because the Indian driving license was not valid in Germany. I didn't have the license to drive. I was actually, we were using public transport. I was moving around in buses. I was moving around in trains. Whereas in contrast to India, where we had two cars and we had, all the luxuries that typically you would think, like to have at a stage in life like that.
So Germany doesn't have like in the UK, for 1 year you can drive in India.
You can do it for 1 year if you are visiting. So you can, with international driving license, you can do that. But if you're living there, you're expected to have your own license.
Okay.
So
the year when you first moved to Germany?
2004.
Okay. Yeah. And you reached Germany just when the winter was starting.
Yeah.
From Chennai, which, as far as I remember, 25 degrees is when the monkey caps come out.
Absolutely. And the irony is, I'll tell you the sometimes you kind of question your decision of why did we take a decision, why did we make a move like that? We were absolutely comfortable, leading a smooth life, and then we suddenly go and we start our lives from scratch. So we moved into a smaller place because it was more expensive. So we were actually living in a one and a half bedroom kind of a house. We didn't have cars. We would go for shopping in and bring the grocery in a bus, or we would walk. Imagine carrying these huge grocery bags in your hand and you have snow all over. We were like,
I have lived that life for a few years. So, but I did that in an English-speaking country, fully. So you got like double the challenge.
But they must have given you a big pay raise, right?
no, I had a good job. So I was head of Germany, Austria, Switzerland. It was a pretty good responsibility, but that didn't change in terms of how you live, right? I mean, you still can't drive. Still okay. I had a nice big office, but that did and that solved the problem.
Were you the first employee in Germany?
No. So they had a small office there. And the size of business was not too big in Europe. In general, the overall business in Europe.
So what I want to know is, what did that first week look like? Because I don't think there was LinkedIn at that time.
No.
You show up as the head of this. There are probably Dotin or Indians.
Yeah.
But how do you get that first meeting with someone who is vitally interested to give you a meeting?
That is tough. I can tell you that. It was quite.
So how did you break that barrier?
So it.
Because most of our audience is younger audience. Most of this audience is, okay, I show up, now what?
Yeah, so the thing is, obviously, because I came from automotive, for me, automotive was the easiest place to start. And if you look at, I mean, I had interacted with Germany in my previous jobs, not in the same capacity, but I knew certain companies, had certain contacts, which were the first go-to, place to start the conversations or start the interactions. But then being part of a larger organization, right? So because the parent organization obviously had other clients also. So, and I was not limited to automotive in that role because I was head of the complete P&L for all business line. So what I still remember the first 6 months, 1 year, we actually focused more on Switzerland, because Switzerland language was less of an issue. It was, I would say, relatively more easy to get business than Germany, because Germany, it takes time to build the relationship. And so obviously those very tactical things were evolving, and then obviously then you start interacting with companies, you get to know the people. I mean,
How does that start? Tell me again, does that start by going to industry conferences? You go out to the conferences, you hand out business cards, you get business cards, you come back to your desk and you start sending emails, it starts cold calling.
Yeah, so it's
like, how does it start?
So it's I would say multiple things you would do, right? So you would do some of the marketing, events. Obviously, we used to have CIO roundtables. We would organize. We used to take the help of the analysts. We would attend exhibitions, seminars, go for talks. We would obviously leverage whatever relationship we had because I was not the only person who had contacts. There were other people who had. So we would probably begin from there, and then the cold calling bit of it starts happening as you start interacting and meeting people in events, and it's a very slow process. It's not there's nothing very, very quick over there.
There's no magic.
And I would work whole day. I would be obviously sitting and doing the regular work. Evenings I would go to Volkshochschule, which is like a language school. It's like a school where you learn different skills. So I used to go I would sit and study with people who were like 20-year-olds who have just moved there as a student, and you would sit and literally study like a school kid. And I'd probably
study the German
language. So I would, and obviously I had to travel. So half of the time I would miss my classes. I would be sheepish every time I have not done my homework. It's like, and this is when I was already in my 40s. So it was not that I was like in my 20s and I was like, I was literally rediscovering, redefining my life and my professional. And obviously I had a lot of pressure to prove myself, because obviously they expect you to, show results. So it was a true challenge. And given that language also comes as a big hindrance, right? So luckily I had an office assistant. She was German. So she would accompany me for some of the meetings just to translate in case it is getting too difficult. Just to ensure that, and obviously it helped in terms of, just having a more international, presence in a meeting room where you're representing a company which has got German employees as well as, non-German employees, for example. So all these factors, slowly you kind of get a grip on it, and then you develop relationship with. And so the beauty of Germany is like most of these companies are very international in terms of their business, because they have a lot of them are international companies. They export a lot. So the senior management invariably speaks English. It's not that they don't, but it's not the language of comfort. So they, given a choice, they would rather not talk in German than not talk in English than otherwise. So as a sales guy, you would try and align yourself, try to give them the comfort that we are not someone who doesn't care for your culture, doesn't care for your language. So I made all those efforts to just, to ensure that they see that, the company is actually culturally sensitive and keen to, work the way the local companies work. So, but it was a tough phase. And today, if you look at, I'm in hindsight, right? It's probably one of the highly profitable markets in Europe for the company. And it is obviously, it has so many Fortune 100 companies, so many Fortune 500 companies. Obviously, that has been at the center of most of the big IT conglomerates are having their clients based out of. I remember those days IBM had, I'm talking about those days, it's a long time, and the numbers would have increased a lot. So Daimler and Volkswagen, both of them used to be $1 billion+ accounts for them. And I was not even in double digits in Germany, double digit millions in Germany. So that was the kind of gap you had with the competition. So you have a company like IBM, which has got a single account like Daimler, which is $1 billion+ in sales, annual sales revenue. Whereas I don't have my total revenue is less than $10 million. So that's where you start from. And today, if you see, all these companies are competing with the likes of IBMs and Accentures and so on and so forth. So,
but Dave, tell us on the personal side. You've talked about language, you've talked about the weather. Obviously, that's a huge difference versus Chennai. But in terms of the people, not the language part, but are they welcoming of foreigners?
People. If you talk on generic terms, people say that it's difficult to break into their social circle. Yeah. Personally, we had a very, very good time in Germany. I would say that people-wise, they are absolutely amazing, because they have very, very high, a very, very, I would say, very, very good value system. It may take them some time to become friends, but once they become friends, they can be friends for life. They will invite you for barbecues, you'll go out on treks together, it's just that initially they are not sure of, who you are and what you are.
Yes. And is there a reasonably big Indian community in the city?
When we went, we were like, I think they were, so I moved into the place which had an international school. Those days companies used to support, so at least the kids didn't have the challenge of language when they moved.
No.
So wherever the international schools were, you would typically find a lot of expats, in and around in that area. And when I moved in, all our competitors, so I had like people with similar profiles, their kids would also go to the same school. So we were maybe 4 or 5 people with similar background, similar profession would be there. And most likely you will be competitors. So you could be competitors in a daily setting, in an office setting. But when you're in the evenings, you would be sitting and drinking together as friends. You could be sitting with people from your competing companies, because you don't have anybody else to initially talk to. I'm talking about the Indian community. We did have quite an active, the Indian High Commission was quite active, Indian Embassy. So they used to have events in Diwalis and Holis and stuff like that, where again you get to meet some, more people but it was a very, very small community compared to today. Today is,
And you were mentioning schools for the kids. What kind of curriculum do the international schools follow? Like there are in different cities, like I know, like in Dubai, for instance, which is quite international.
Yeah.
Yes, they have Indian curriculum schools, they've got British curriculum, they've got American curriculum, and that too, even IB is a fourth curriculum.
so these
What
schools,
kind of
again, you have a mix, but where my daughter went to school was an IB school. So that was, I think it helped in some ways that they didn't have to, initially, and it also helps because if you're moving out of the country, it's easier if you're coming from an international school. Because if you're studied in German, it becomes a little bit more difficult for them to adapt later on.
So Dave, because most of our audience is younger audience and they say people are graduating, going to getting a job placement in Germany, or they work with Infosys or something, Wipro for a couple of years and now they're moving to Germany. What advice will you give them? If you could tell them 3 sentences.
I would say, it's a lot easier today than it was in the past, partly because of social media. You are very, very well connected even before you go there, right? So you are well connected, cost of communication is negligible. Those days we didn't have free calling, right?
You didn't have.
So you would actually spend a lot of money in just making calls to India or making calls international. So cost-wise, it has become much easier. And overall, the number of people who are currently working in countries all over Europe, all over the world, I would say. The number of professionals who are currently already working there, the numbers have increased significantly. I don't think it's going to be very difficult for anybody moving into any of these countries. It won't be the payment side.
about it. So we recently launched as IMB Alumni Association, the Continental Europe chapter. And then very quickly there was like another chapter which came, which was like the Nordic chapter, which is different from Continental Europe. Because it was, and the minimum one needs is for there to be a quorum of people, at least. And technically we need like 25 people who are willing to make a new chapter. 3 people launching a chapter is not really a chapter. And now we have a third chapter coming up in Europe. So, things are progressing so fast. What I see from the Alumni Association front, it has to be people-driven.
Absolutely. And we were talking about IIMs, right? So I'm saying if you expand it outside IIM.
If you do pan IIM, I'm sure there are way more people than back when you moved there.
Absolutely. No, I think it's a global. We have become a lot more global. There's no doubt about it. The challenges of business, the challenges of adapting to a new country, it remains. I think it looks very glamorous from outside, but I think we know how challenging it is at least in the first couple of years, till you have some kind of financial stability and some kind of understanding of where you stand in terms of living there. And I think even the spouses, they face. So Germany, my wife used to work in India. When she moved to Germany, the spouses are not allowed to work for the first 2 years or 3 years, unlike UK where they can work at right from start. So that was also a big challenge, because it's not easy. So for how someone who's used to working, how do they move to a new country where you don't have friends, where you can't speak to people, things are culturally quite different, how that can. So those are very, very understated challenges that we face when we move into a country, and it takes some amount, quite a lot of effort to get to adapt to some of these.
So Dave, I hear you telling us that, look, communication is much easier, social media is there, so you'll feel connected to your family in India. There's a larger body of expats in Europe now, but still, teen advice.
So I would say, if you're moving to a country, I started enjoying Germany a lot more when I knew the language. So
First step.
First of all, having an open mind to not force, in India I was doing something like this, I will continue to do like that. I think it's good to have an open mind and embrace, the culture, the place, the language that you are exposed.
And if you're married, would you suggest to leave the wife behind for some time? You're not pale, white. No, skip.
They give us the on the record answer and then we will pause it and give us off the record.
No, the thing is, it is challenging for the spouse, and I know people where the wife has moved because she has got a job, and the husband is not working. So there are a lot of cases like that also, and it's equally difficult for them. It's not that it's any better. So
one, learn the language. Second, leave wife behind. What's the third?
yeah, and then I would say that, of course, initially, like when I moved in, financially it was challenging. It was not that I had a lot of savings that I could go on holidays.
I would be surprised, even for people who are getting jobs in UK from IIM recent grads, they are saving more money if they continue to work in India compared to if they get a promotion and then move to UK.
Yeah,
That's the thing, 30% tax or whatever, 35% tax versus nearly 50% tax at these salary levels.
Yeah.
50% the government takes, and then cost of housing, the rental is huge out here.
True. That's true.
I mean, as you can see, we moved here. I mean, we are paying more than 3 grand.
Yeah.
3,000.
Yeah.
More than 3,000 to just have a house per month.
Yeah.
I mean, India में अगर मैंने इतना पैसा कर दिया by conversion, and by the way, salaries in India at certain levels, certain profession are higher or at least the same by direct conversion of the pound or the euro. So it's not lower. Now if you say that महीने का 3 लाख में क्या आलीशान mansion मिलेगा इंडिया, बॉम्बे में मिलेगा, पारी mansion मिलेगा आपको 3 लाख per month में.
True. Yeah, that's true. I would abstain from comparing everything. No, I think you have to let go of comparison when you're. Yeah, I think you have to look at a lot. One is that the fact that you are living, the experience, the value of experiencing another world, another part of the world, I think is very, very. I think if I look at how I am today versus how I was maybe 20 years ago, the way I think, the way I look at the world, I mean, I am definitely not exposure. You're exposure, absolutely, and the way you think, the way you look at it, the confidence level that I have today in terms of, I mean, I can be at par with anywhere in the world you put me. I know I can survive, I can do well. It's like that. That's the kind of confidence you get once you have gone through this whole grind of, starting from going through the grind of settling in a different.
Yeah, like a diamond, when it comes out of the mine, it actually doesn't shine. It needs to go through the grind to shine. होती नहीं है तो fact है. Diamond mine से चमकता हुआ नहीं निकलता.
In fact, Dev, I completely identify with, because I did a second MBA. I had the luxury of coming to an English-speaking country rather than the language differences. But at 32, and when I graduated, I was nearly 34. And then I started from scratch, pretty much in the career, because you're a fresh MBA. दे देते हैं leave.
Yeah.
But then not like 10 years of your life. You're still going to work through the whole thing, especially if you're changing some industry, sector, this and that. And people say, okay. And I'll share one more thing. The first job I got here, which started as a summer internship and then morphed into like a full-time kind of role, and I worked there for nearly a year.
Literally made their whole model and
for that, it was like, I was like literally associate level after working for nearly a decade in India.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm mentioning that is, as an associate, in private equity, associate is like you won't get to be a director on the board of the companies that the fund owns, but you will still be an advisor and attend all board meetings. And so it's pretty much senior level responsibilities, even as an associate. And half of our portfolio, which I was on the board of, were German companies. So this PE fund that I worked for was half German, half English portfolio. And that's when I realized it was senior management. Although you were saying that senior management know a bit of English, I absolutely not their comfortable language. They speak very broken English. So I learned over that.
But conscious about it also. Germans are very conscious that they don't know English.
Yeah, and they're not apologetic about it. Let's put it that way. But at the same time, they are practical enough to want to, because they know, okay, here's this guy, इसको तो German आती नहीं है, हमको थोड़ी बहुत English आती है. Over those 8 or 10 months that I worked with some of these portfolio companies के CEOs and CFOs, I also did a bit of like online. उस time पे Rosetta Stone used to be. They got some CDs. So by the end of it, I was speaking broken German, they were speaking broken English, but we were all professional enough, and that's what I respect. Is they were professional enough to not hold it against me. They knew that we have to get the work done. This is what it is. And I see, the reason I'm mentioning is I see some cultures. There are some cultures, some within Europe and some outside Europe, where people aren't that open about language and or welcoming that this guy doesn't know our language, so it's a big cultural barrier. I mean, yes, language is the foundation of cultural differences. I mean, even in India, and we grew up in India, so we recognize that. You go to Mumbai for the first time, half the people, okay, Marathi is similar to Hindi, so you can get around. But if you don't know Marathi, you don't get in the cultural circle.
Language and food. Language and food is what they dekho. As IIM Bangalore, when we all graduated from hostels, was a good microcosm of the whole of India. And language and food is what created the groups.
So food se yaad aaya. There's one last question on your German experience, Dev.
And then we go to the case study.
Yeah, इस type की चीजें Germany में मिलती हैं easily.
No, so the thing is,
Every high street, at least in the suburbs that I have.
you know what, the example which I give often when people ask about, how's your experience Germany versus UK, for example. So in Germany, when I used to buy an equipment, right, I would buy, say, a vacuum cleaner, okay? You would get an instruction manual, and the instruction manual will have 10 languages or 12 languages, but it will not have it in English. So imagine you are trying to figure out how to operate an equipment, and I would actually literally, I have done it for several things. When I'm setting up my internet connection, or I would actually have a dictionary in one hand or whatever the translator mechanism you are using, and I would open the instruction manual word by word, or you would be, going on to Google and, it will take me, 10 times more effort to just figure out what is this button called, what does this do, what does that do. And that's how, and the other thing is, like, if you're watching a movie, so Germany, because they have enough critical mass, so all Hollywood movies also come dubbed. So it's very rarely you get to see an English movie or a Hollywood movie which is in native language. So I have seen James Bond movies where the one-liners are actually in German. So you find the whole hall is laughing, but you are wondering what's going on. So we were there for about 6 years. The only channel we could have got cable which had English, Hindi and all, but we deliberately didn't do it because we wanted to force ourselves to learn German. So our TV had only CNN as the only English channel. So even the ads, even the interludes of anything, we knew each and everything about CNN that time, because that was the only channel we could watch on television. Then we moved to UK, and I remember we went to the office for registration, right? So when you land, so we were filling up the forms, and I was at one of the, this was in Wimbledon, we went to the borough there, and the council office, and the form, they had about 10 or 12 languages in which you could fill the form. Out of those 12 languages, 7 of them I could relate to it as Indian languages. Out of 12, they had Bengali, they had Gujarati, they had Punjabi, they had Urdu, they had Tamil, I was like,
yes.
It was like, it's strange for me. It was not even that they are just doing English, right? English and Hindi. They had
and I know you are mentioning them as Indian languages, but the reason they have Bengali is because Urdu is for the Pakistan and the Bangladesh people.
I know that, but
you know what this reminded me? You've done all this manual thing in German. have you gone through 200-page due diligence reports which are in German?
I have worked on RFPs where the complete document, you will have like 10 PDFs, everything in German. But of course, then we spend a lot of money and effort in translating it and then getting it and replying. But language is something which you have to have a. So we had a complete engine which worked when it came to work-related documents, right? Because you have a deadline, you have a timeline where you have to respond. And if you got, say, if you're working on a large deal and all the documents are in German, that too, I'm talking about technical documents. These are not even like, English, normal English. So we actually spent thousands and thousands and thousands of euros and whatever currency you want to talk about in actually getting it translated, dedicated translation companies, etc., without which it was impossible to deal with. So these were like always, because, our team in India, obviously, they can't read that unless it is translated. Then there were things which are getting lost in translation at times and things like that.
So Dev, I think it is well established that you know more about the automotive industry than any IIM professor, okay?
I am not sure about that, but
I am sure about you have graduated way before me, so let me guarantee you that you know more about than any IIM. We also know that the Indian economy is currently at 4 trillion and it's going to go to 50 trillion in the next 20 years. It's going to grow explosively. It's going to be one of the largest growing economies in the world. Automotive is going to be a big sector. So we could not think of anyone else that we could bring on this show to help our viewers understand the automotive industry.
Yeah.
Okay, like these are people who want to be entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
These are people who are thinking कि अरे यार इंडिया में बहुत गाड़ियाँ बिकेंगी तो मैं टायर बना सकता हूँ, मैं नट बना सकता हूँ, मैं ब्रेक बना सकता हूँ. Yeah, this can be even people working in big automotive companies. What does that future look like? It might be students जिनके पास 2 जॉब ऑफर्स है, एक कंसल्टिंग कंपनी का जॉब ऑफर है, एक टाटा मोटर्स का जॉब ऑफर है.
Yeah.
So can you give us a understanding of what does the Indian automotive industry today look like? First question. And second, what do you expect in the short term, medium term and the long term for the Indian automotive industry?
Okay, so let me first talk about the automotive industry per se, right? So automotive industry on its own has been, over hundreds of years, it has always been a very, very integral part of the GDP, right? So there's certain sectors of the industry which kind of play a very important role in, because it has a lot of derived demand also. Even the IT companies, they get shaken up if the manufacturing sector is slowing down, because ultimately the systems are required to be built for the end customers, right? So you are actually catering to a power company, you are catering to a telecom company, you're catering to an automotive company. And typically, I would say it's 3 to 5%, or maybe even higher in some economies, of the GDP is kind of contributed by the auto sector. So you can't ignore it. It is there to stay. Even though there is a lot of, I would say, people are becoming more and more conscious about environment and they want to cut down, the number of vehicles, they want to move to electric. All those things, the reshaping of the industry is definitely happening, and it will continue to happen in terms of what kind of fuel you're using, what's likely to be the future, way of travel, mode of travel, etc. Would shared mobility become more important going forward? Because I see a lot of the young people, they don't want to even own a car. Like my daughter is not very keen to own a car. She would rather go and use a zip car or
transport or
shared vehicle than, not because they can't afford it, it's because they are like becoming more conscious about that. Why should I?
There's in सारे young people के I also see this trend, but जब बच्चे होंगे ना और school और hospital की
that जब grocery में back trend full चाहिए, I think 2 days.
But the thing is, it's changing. What I'm saying, the mindset is changing, right? So now coming back to India, India is a huge market on its own, right? Forget India being a base in terms of supplying to rest of the world, as an export market. On its own, it's still, if you look at the per capita car per for the population, it's still the numbers are very, very low compared to what it is there in the West. And
I think even China, I saw some numbers just yesterday that Indian auto industry has grown like 10 times or 20 times in the last 5 or 10 years. But even right now, it is like 1/10 of China or 1/5 of China in that region.
yeah, so China is already the world's largest automotive market, right? So it has superseded America a few years ago, and again, China population-wise, they have got a very huge demand internally. At the same time, China being very, very strong in the manufacturing compared to India in terms of as a base for manufacturing, where obviously India is trying to compete in that space. I think India is kind of getting held back, was not right now, but was getting held back partly because the infrastructure was not as good as what you see in some of the other economies, other bigger economies. But now the road conditions have improved. I think affordability has increased. So the numbers are definitely on the rise, and it still has a huge room to grow, provided the cities can absorb that kind of growth. Provided, because our problem is going to be less of affordability, but more about the environment in which we are operating. And you look at Bangalore, you look at Bombay, you look at it is not that comfortable, not that easy when it comes to moving around within the city by car. So those things will hold back. But in terms of brands, in terms of international attraction, where companies, everybody wants to be part of the growth story when it comes to automotive. In terms of the know-how of the technology, you will be surprised. All the big companies of the world, their main team when it comes to IT and engineering services, most of the teams today operate out of India. And I know so many companies where they're reducing the size of their operations in US or in Europe, and they are just increasing the size of the team in India. So India is...
Why is that? So is it cost? Is it talent?
It's a combination of all. So cost is a factor. Scalability in India is much better than what you can scale up in, because it's not easy to find so many people to do the job. The amount of software which is going into the car today is absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, if you look at what we call the software-defined vehicles, exactly what I think, because you were talking about in terms of what's happening, that cars are now more. In fact, Manish, you were also mentioning that the cars are now being built around the computer itself, as a computer. So that whole shift of thinking has happened. It's already there. I mean, software-defined vehicles are the latest so-called jargon which everybody talks about in the industry, and how it is going to shape the way the cars are built, the way the cars are maintained, the way the cars are going to operate in future. India is definitely a very, and you'll be surprised how that India has some of the amazing people who are probably working on the most cutting edge features of the world cars, but they may not be using it, but they are sitting in their offices and actually writing the code for that. And I've had experiences, my personal experiences, where people who are coding out of India, they may have never seen, they may have never driven a particular, like forward collision detection system, for example. None of the cars that they have ever driven will have that feature, probably. They have never seen that in action on the Indian roads, but they are actually coding it for a high-end European OEM or a high-end American OEM.
So it's very interesting. Instead of thinking of exporting tires, which then gets installed in the car that's sold in Europe, we are exporting the software that gets installed in the car that's sold.
Yeah, that's already happening. I mean, that's happening for the last 20 years. Yeah. So knowledge export is already happening in terms of the kind of work that is being done in India today in automotive space. It's mind-boggling. Of course, the amount of investments the companies, OEMs probably make. So what's happening is that a lot of the international companies, they are still keeping the core technology, the core know-how close to where the headquarters is. But there are a lot of other features, other functionalities which has to be done at scale which requires, like, suppose you're doing a testing of all the integration of all the softwares in the vehicle, for example, which requires, say, 1,000 people team. That they will move it without any doubt to the team in India. But if they are working on hydrogen fuel, for example, they will not probably take that research work into India yet. I mean, that's also changing. I know a lot of the CIOs and the CTOs of global companies, initially, a lot of the American companies, they moved their CTOs and CIOs to Europe, because Europe was, again, like, I know a lot of them were operating out of Germany. Now, I find a lot of them are moving away from Germany and they're located in India.
So they're moving the CIOs and CTOs?
Yes, so I know some of the companies where the head of IT, the head of R&D is actually operating from India.
So would you like to share some names?
For example, Visteon, for example. So, there are many companies. There are many companies which are in that category, and the trend is only increasing. More and more companies are actually expanding their teams in India and cutting down their operations in European or American center. So India is in a very, very sweet spot right now. I think what I sometimes miss, or where I feel probably we should try and do a better job, is I find a lot of senior technical people, they kind of move away from technology and want to get more into the management of it. So they want to be program managers, they want to be, they're more keen to go away from tech, and they don't want to be, unlike what I see in Germany, or unlike what I see in some of the other countries, where you could be, like, I work with somebody in Germany, which works for one of the global tier 1 companies. That person is, for the last 25 years, that person, I mean, he's probably, his designation is not very fancy, but he is working on the most cutting edge technology as far as automotive is concerned. I'm sure he's getting paid very well, at par with probably what his colleagues in management would be getting paid. But he loves his area so much, his field of technology so much, that he doesn't want to get into general management. That profile is actually missing in India. I feel the moment we spend 10 years in coding, we want to get out of it, and we want to get into managing teams and managing people. That's something.
I think
that's important.
Yes, I think we were talking about the importance of culture, and I think one thing someone with so much experience is saying, and I hope this message reaches all the automotive engineers, that there's pride in remaining an engineer.
And value is a depth of knowledge, because it's not easy to create that depth of knowledge.
Yes.
So I think that's, of course, it's partly the organizations, they need to have, technical streams and management streams, how you compensate them, how you reward them. I mean, those are things which obviously require some restructuring and a realignment of how you encourage depth of knowledge in an organization. I think that's something I think a lot of Indian companies probably need to look at also. But so that is, so depth, I would say, I would like to see more depth. There are soft skills where I think we still need to improve to some extent. So there are a lot of soft skills in terms of communication, in terms of punctuality. I still find it as an issue. I think it's a cultural thing which is very, very different. And I'm particularly, in Germany, you can't imagine being late for meetings, or it's just not done. These are like, you don't even have to state it. It's a given. That it's become better. So companies which are in international business, they're better. But in general, the soft factors like punctuality, even things like how we present a document, for example. These are how, even simple things like spellings. We take certain things for granted, or we don't value it so much. But it matters. How the finished document looks, is important. If you want to really play at the global level, I think even sometimes we make a joke out of it that why should you worry about the font, why should you worry about the spelling, but but it matters. In real life, it matters.
Yeah.
So I think those things, those soft factors still need to, when a document comes from India, by a team from India, it needs to, I think some of these factors need to be, better than what probably it is. And again, I'm generalizing. I mean, I'm sure there are many companies who are absolutely fantastic, but in general, we come across, challenges which are maybe more acceptable in some circumstances, but I would, if I have to compete with the best of the best in the world, I would definitely try to improve upon that.
So tell me this, suppose if a fresh MBA grad, somebody who has graduated MBA, he may have had some work experience before he went into MBA and he wants to be an entrepreneur. What opportunities are worth exploring in the automotive sector?
Oh, amazing. I think, in fact, I'm writing a book called Money on Wheels, which I've been on it for a few years already. And, even the
I love the title, Money on
Wheels is the new.
And I think we'll call this episode The Money on Wheels. It will get blockbuster views.
What that whole book is centered around is that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when I started my career, I mean, automotive sector was still dominated by very, very large corporates because of convergence of technology in automotive, right? So automotive is no longer automotive alone. I mean, it is telecom, it's FMCG, it is consumer electronics, you have got medical devices getting into it, which can monitor it's a completely different world right now when it comes to automotive. And what has happened is that, so I'm talking about meetings with BMW. I'm talking about, where I've sat in meetings, and the so-called veterans in BMW, they are worried about how they can cope with all these variations and varieties of new technologies that are coming into the car. And they cannot have all the experts within their own organization. So what has happened in the last 10 years is that lot of very small but very specialized companies which is able to do a particular thing very well, they have started becoming extremely important for these big companies. And earlier they used to have a lot of restrictions that unless you are of a specific size, unless your financial status is of a certain level, you cannot become our vendors, you cannot become our suppliers. You have to be a reasonably large company with a large track record before you can, approach us as becoming a supplier. It's no longer true. You can be a 20 people company and you could be working directly for Daimler, directly for BMW, directly for JLR, just because you are working on something which they don't know. So it has.
So what can that be? Can startup in Bangalore specialize in car seats?
Yeah. I work with a company right now. Of course, they are doing more aircraft seats to start with, and it started as a 30 people company so they had one operations in Noida and another in Bangalore. They have about 50 people right now, and they are currently the kind of work they do. I mean, they can probably contribute to any of the OEMs in the world. And we have had some interactions. We are talking about VTOLs, right? So vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, which are like flying cars. So there you need to have, it's what has happened, you need skills of both aerospace and automotive, and you have to blend some of these technologies together for operating some of these features. Those, you can't find many companies which can do both, for example. Or you can't find many individuals. So you need to have a mix of people coming with some aerospace background and automotive background and being part of the same team, for example. So you have such opportunities emerging in the field for, whether it is electronics, whether it is safety, whether it is, you pick a part of the car, any part of the car, and you will find an opportunity sitting there for a company.
So you pick the headlights and say that I want to become an expert in headlights, and I'm going to...
Good example is look at the headlamps today in cars. How different it has become from what it was 10 years ago. You just look at the shapes, you look at the kind of technology they are using behind to operate those lamps. I think Tesla has got a feature where one Tesla, if it sees another Tesla, if you have enabled that feature, it will honk to the other vehicle, right? It's like a vehicle to vehicle communication happening. Somebody needs to have that expertise to be able to have expertise in cloud, expertise in V2V, V2X. I don't know. I mean, it's endless. The opportunities are endless, and you don't have to do everything. I mean, you could just be doing one small part of, but the vehicle needs it. The team needs it, and if to just to back up my point. So if you go to BMW's site, you will find they have something called BMW Startup Garage.com. There's a separate section which is actually.
Thank you for pointing it out. I didn't know that there was a BMW.
Yeah, happy if you just go to Google and see there is a BMW startup.
The episode is Money on Wheels, BMW Startup Garage.
So BMW Startup Garage.com is actually if you have an idea and you just go and tell. So there's a team of experts in BMW. They are just asking people to come with ideas or whatever they have created and talk to them. And if they find it interesting, they may invest. If they are not investing, they may still buy from you. It was unheard of and this is not just BMW. Most of the OEMs have got schemes like that now.
And I think this is not just restricted to automobile. Right now, most corporates have realized that there is a lot of talent and innovation across not internal but external.
Yeah.
So people are doing corporate ventures a lot. People are doing these venture incubators a lot, and even just doing or getting people in as freelancers rather than employees. For the innovation is important, and I think this the first one that I remember did it at a reasonable scale, and this was back in my FMCG days, was Procter and Gamble. They did even before the phrase was coined, or maybe they coined the phrase of crowdsourcing in FMCG. And I still remember that because I was a marketing person back then. I think in my heart, I'm probably still a marketing person, but I don't do that for a living anymore. Which brings me to your key point about convergence, about all this innovation happening outside and cars and vehicles, not just being only the structure or the transport thing that we have known for the last 100 years, but being a convergence of technology and doing everything, including probably for the driver, if you're holding the wheel. I think you hinted at that, was having heart monitors and all that. It's like, are you feeling more stressed and things like that? So is that why we are seeing a lot of, and Tesla did it beautifully, which is why I call Tesla a technology company with a car built around it. Huawei, I don't know how to pronounce that. They have done it. But what's your thought about the Apple car project? 10 years, Steve Jobs started it in more than a decade ago, and they just shut shop. I think it was called, what was it called? Titan, Project Titan? Is that?
Yeah, see, you can't take away the strength that 100-year-old company has, whether it's Daimler, whether it's Toyota, whether it's General Motors, Ford, making 1,000 cars, making 10,000 cars is still manageable. But when you have to make 10 million cars per year, it's no longer the same game. What's happening right now, a lot of the new companies, the new age companies, are actually still, they have not reached the level where the real big global automotive companies are. And it's not even about technology.
I believe Tesla is like, their largest market is China, and they're like, although it is reducing now with all these Chinese EV, but Tesla has still a pretty big market share in China, isn't it?
Yeah, but you can't compare it with the conventional car companies, right? I mean, no way. I mean, we are talking about, their market cap is higher because of the company. People like it as a share value of the company, but they don't have the same kind of size. The way they can, like the way an assembly line can be run by Daimler, for example. I mean, Tesla will take a long time to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. No, you're right. And in fact, right in my house, so I've got two cars. We've got a recent Tesla. I say recent, it's still a year and a half old. And I've got a 14-year-old Jaguar, which the day we got the new Tesla, and versus my, at that time, 13-year-old Jaguar, which in the MOT, they were saying your suspension is just about all right. It's passing our MOT levels, but you need to get it fixed. my Jaguar has better suspension and on speed bumps or whatever than my
Newton.
first day test. Yeah, new test. And I mean, but at the same time, it doesn't have those electronics. Partly because it's 14-year-old,
Yeah.
and back then the technology wasn't there.
Yeah.
But more importantly, it's like everything is. I believe I read something about Ford. Is because every technology is a different supplier, different OEM.
Yeah.
But Tesla has done it like centralized. So this is the technology, and then now you build the car around it, which is keep going back. It's all centralized.
Yeah.
Everything is centralized. Then every manufacturer making their own tech to fit into the car. So the window manufacturer having a window tech, and the starting motor technology OEM has their own tech, and then someone is sitting in the middle and then overloading the car with all the APIs.
Yeah. No, the car industry has, I think, is in one of its most exciting phase ever in the history of. Partly because of what's going on with all the new technologies that's coming in. There is a lot which we will figure out downstream. I mean, it's still early stages of to understand how some of these things will behave. Even simple things like the resale value of electric cars. We have not yet reached a stage where we really know what we will get back, or what the resale value will be compared to what the petrol or the diesel engine vehicles are.
IIM aspirants and current students and recent alumni watch our show.
Yeah.
If they were to be hired on placements or lateral entry into one of these car companies, say a Maruti or a Tata Motors or a Hyundai, what are the top 3 tips you'd give to a fresh MBA or a current student for their interview?
Yeah.
What are the things they should be on top of?
Yeah. So I think one is to be aware of the trends. So one is at a very high level. That high level is what we talk about. We call it, the acronym we use in the industry is CASE, CASE, right? So it's connected, automotive, autonomous, shared, and electric. Each of these, so what's going on in this, what are the challenges that the industry is facing, how they are overcoming, how they are, but some of the inherent issues that the industry faces right now, and particularly for MBAs who are coming and who have a lot of choice in terms of where they can go after an MBA from a school like IIM, for example. The car industry, money-wise, will still struggle to compete. Which means, like someone like me who has still stuck with this sector, but I kind of found a good blend between a software career blended with automotive career, kind of I have forced it on myself. I mean, if I really wanted it to, free flow and just go after the money side of it, I would have probably had to compromise on the vertical experience. You have to move away from too much specialization if you want to, really go up the ladder. But that's a personal choice, right? So for someone who's thinking of a career, like suppose I have a very, very good engineering base, engineering background, and then I've done an MBA, and I love engineering and I want to stay with manufacturing, etc., etc. You need to have that soft corner for this industry, which should override the fact that somebody else who's in consulting and they are getting more money part. I think you have to look at it very objectively as to what gives you enjoyment in terms of the work that you do versus what chasing just the salary part of it. That, I think, is one hindrance which even in campus, and I'll compare it like when in my engineering college, the automotive companies were first day companies. Like Tata was like the first day company for a very, very priced job. At IIM, it was, I think, a 5th day company, 6th day company, because the salary was nowhere close to what the banks were giving or the consulting companies were giving or some of the IT companies were giving. So you have to keep some of these things at the back of your mind. In terms of excitement of technology, in terms of the kind of work that you can do, the kind of exposure you can get globally, I think it's a very, very interesting field. And people who love cars, I think for them, it's one of the best time to get in this industry, because it's like an open slate. It can, there's a lot going on. There's a lot that you can do. There's a lot that you can shape in terms of how the business grows, and it will continue to be an important sector. I don't see, like you earlier talked about, is Germany facing any challenge on that front? I mean, these are more like blips, I would call it. They're not necessarily, going to affect their course. I mean, they have been through world wars. They've been through, much more serious situations in the past, and they've survived. I mean, these companies are 100+ year old companies, right? So I don't think you can shake up the fundamentals of the need for mobility. Like, obviously, we will continue to have some form of mobility. The base technology may change. It may electric, may move to hydrogen, may move to fuel cells, whatever. That doesn't matter. I mean, that's just, but it is something which, like, for me, it has been the love of the industry which has kind of, pulled me, and in a positive way, and like in a negative way, that I didn't let it go when I should have let it go at some point if I wanted to, achieve other objectives. So for a fresh grad, a lot of opportunities, get to know understanding the challenges also, because the world power in the auto sector has shifted. It used to be, like, if you see, just take 50-year snapshot, Japan was very, very dominant. From Japan, it moved to America. From America, it's moved to China. I won't be surprised if a lot of it will start shifting towards India, because it's a very natural.
But Dave, you didn't mention Germany in that.
Okay, Germany may also. Germany was
the perennial number twos.
Yeah, so Germany was also. I mean, it is. So Germany continues to be an important hub, right? If you look at their economy, probably automotive continues to be one of the important pillars of their economy, unlike US or unlike maybe some of the other countries. So,
and it's
these are all emerging. So these are all emerging, important emerging automotive. Even Vietnam, currently I'm dealing with companies out of Vietnam, which was nowhere in the picture earlier. And they are trying to compete in the global stage with some of the brands, which is very, very. It was a surprising interaction from my perspective, because
even for me, I've never heard of Vietnam in the same breath as car industry
but they're all getting into the space, because the industry has there's so many new entrants coming in, there's so many new things happening that the old bastions have kind of lost their hold on the market. So you'll find a new brand. I saw it in California, in fact. What's that new car which is very fancy, much better more popular than Tesla right now? Which I forget, but I should have asked. Yeah. I mean, so it's like if you can come up with a car with amazing features, functionalities, I mean, people will go for it. And I'm talking about they are more in the premium, super specialized car segment, like what Aston Martin is, or what Bentley is, or what a Maserati is. I mean, they don't sell by numbers, right? They sell more by what they created as specific opportunities. But India has already has seen a lot of change. I don't know if it can compete in the same breath as maybe the IT sector, or in terms of the kind of revenue it generates for the or GDP it generates for the country. But it will continue to grow, and it continue to be important. Partly because a lot of the tech work will get done out of India.
I mean, I can, if I put the pieces that you've said together, I think India is at an inflection point, in my opinion, on a number of sectors in the economy. And manufacturing, like you said, manufacturing is always the core of the economy, and without manufacturing, just all these other ancillary sectors, they can't run. Even before cars, there's the highway sector and the infrastructure sector, and then on top of that is the manufacturing sector that's built up. And on top of that is all the tech and services sectors that get built up. But the other thing that you said, which I've had this thought, but you put it very succinctly, is the convergence between tech and manufacturing that's happening across sectors, but especially in automotive. That's hugely important. And for a new graduate, the way I see it, if I were a new graduate, the learning I'm taking here is I could be a tech guy with a love for cars. I don't need to be on the shop floor all the time. You've made that switch. I could specialize in automotive in a tech company, or I could specialize in the tech part of an automotive major and still make a career out of it, rather than thinking automotive है shop floor पे तो जाना ही पड़ेगा. And then the third thing which you said, which I slightly disagree with, is, but I agree with in the short and medium term, is when you over specialize, then short and medium term it's very difficult to move around. Because, and it's true for liquidity. Your liquidity is so low that how will you even move around?
I agree.
But once you reach beyond middle or senior level, then you're probably the only one person. Your liquidity is still low. But because of that, if someone is looking for that spec, you can demand whatever. They will pay through their nose if it comes to that.
No, I think that's a very, very, it's a personal choice, I would say. Because I mean, as MBAs, we are trained to be generalists, right? The main thing that we learn in MBA, at least what I learned, is about the importance of all the other departments in the company. Earlier as an engineer, you thought everything is revolving around engineering and manufacturing, but suddenly you realize finance is as important as HR, as important as sales, as important as purchasing. I mean, you can't have a good organization unless all the pieces work together. And that only you learn when you look at it as a general manager. If you're not a general management person, if you're very biased as I'm only going to think in terms of HR, I mean, you can't be, you can't do a lot of good to the company. So, I mean, that's
that. I'll stick my neck out, and Viks isn't here because he has a diametrically opposite view on.
Oh, is it?
Which is that, and this is probably Silicon Valley startup world experience, that people frown on MBAs in that part of the world. That you've done, you'll just be doing XYZ. But in my opinion, and this is my view, is I think MBAs make the best startup founders, because what does a founder need to do? He needs to do a bit of everything. He needs to know the tech. Or she. He or she needs to know the tech, needs to know some finances, how to manage cash flow, needs to know a bit of marketing, have to sell to customers, initial customers. Jack of all trades. You have to be jack of all trades. And I think MBA is the best jack of all trades in the world.
Yeah, and MBAs teach you to be entrepreneurs, right? So we are trained actually to think like an entrepreneur. So I agree with you, and what you're saying is absolutely right. But in a large corporation, the equation changes.
Yes.
In a large corporation, it works different, because then you look at specialists differently from generalists when it comes to managing a large company. Because you don't want a very specialized, which is again very different in Germany. In Germany, you'll find, if you look at the board members, half of them will be doctors, PhD doctors, because that economy, that the way the organizations also kind of, they like to have a lot of super specialized people on the board, which is not necessarily the case in US probably. It's a different kind of approach to how you run companies and how you manage companies. I think it's partly how the education system is, and how people are. The way people think, right? So it varies from country to country and so on and so forth. So,
yes. Perfect. I think that, Dev, that was like a very succinct analysis, especially for our viewers, fresh graduates or current students, how to and why to get into the automotive industry, and why not to also, if it doesn't match their choices in life.